If you were a surrogate mother and the biological parents abandons the pregnancy just because they found out the fetus is defective, what would you do? Let's take a look at the story of Ngozi and see what she did and the lessons we learned from this story. In the town of Umuahia lived Mr. and Mrs. Mba, a rich couple who loved each other very much. For 18 long years, they had been childless after enduring the heartbreak of 3 miscarriages, 2 failed IUIs, and 6 grueling IVFs. Their hope for a child seemed lost. Gloria became a shadow. The whispers of neighbors and the pitying glances of friends cut deeper than she showed. Social gatherings became unbearable as friends and family raised questions that hinted at her childlessness or the seemingly innocent advice and recommendations. Mr. Ndu Mba loved his wife very much, but he was a proud and traditional man who viewed adoption and surrogacy as beneath his status. Gloria, he would say firmly, whenever the topic arose, I am Ndu Mba. My bloodline is my legacy, and I will not raise another man's child, nor will I consent to a total stranger birthing my child. But Ndu, Gloria pleaded one evening after yet another round of failed IVF treatment. If we choose surrogacy, the child will still be yours and mine. As long as we have someone to love, someone to call our own, does it matter whose womb it grows in? Ndu's face hardened. It matters to me, Gloria. You knew this before you married me. I would rather remain childless than compromise my pride. The cracks in their marriage deepened with every passing year. Gloria often felt trapped between her husband's unyielding pride and her own yearning for motherhood. She would spend nights weeping silently in their bedroom, her hands clutching her stomach as if willing it to bring forth life. Ndu, though silently anguished, refused to acknowledge her pain in words. His pride was both his armor and his prison. Ngozi Udo was a devout Christian woman. She had been married to her husband Ekene Udo for over 12 years. They were blessed with 4 beautiful daughters. Ngozi and her husband struggled financially. They made their living from her housekeeping and Ekene's bricklaying jobs. Raising 4 children on meager finances was a constant struggle. Every day presented a new challenge, but they faced it with unwavering love for each other and their children. For the past 8 years, Ngozi had worked as a housekeeper for the Mbas. She had always been a compassionate and observant woman. Over the years, she watched Mrs. Gloria Mba endure unimaginable emotional suffering, and it weighed heavily on her heart. One afternoon, as she folded the laundry, she paused when she heard a familiar sound from the other room. She hesitated, debating whether to intrude, but something urged her forward. She knocked softly on the bedroom door. "Madam," she called. Gloria quickly wiped her face and turned away. "Yes, Ngozi, what is it?" Ngozi stepped into the room cautiously, her hands clasped in front of her. "I've been praying for you, madam. I know how heavy your heart is, and I want you to know that God sees your pain." Gloria's shoulders trembled as fresh tears flowed. "Ngozi, I try to trust him, but it feels like he has abandoned me. I've prayed, I've fasted, done everything, and still my womb remains empty. Do you know what it is like to carry such shame? To see people pity you? To feel useless to the man you're married to?" Ngozi's throat tightened. Madam, I may not know your pain, oh, but I understand struggle. My husband and I have raised 4 children with little to nothing. There are days when I wonder if we will make it, but I've learned that God's timing is not ours. He will make a way even when it seems impossible. Ngozi, witnessing Gloria's suffering, stirred something deep within her, a desire to help, to be part of easing this woman's pain. She began to pray for guidance. It was during one of those prayer sessions that the idea of surrogacy first came to her mind. She didn't make the decision lightly. She spent days seeking her husband Ekene's approval. The evening of the next day, after she got her husband's consent, she approached Mr. and Mrs. Mba in the sitting room. Gloria sat quietly, her hands folded in her laps, staring absently at the family photo on the wall. Mr. Mba, seated beside her, was flipping through a newspaper, though his distracted expression made it clear he wasn't reading. Ngozi hesitated in the doorway for a moment, silently praying for the right words before clearing her throat. Madam, Oga, both Gloria and Mr. Mba turned to her. Yes, Ngozi? Ngozi stepped forward, clasping her hands nervously. I've been praying about your situation, and I believe God has placed it in my heart to help you. Mr. Mba furrowed his brows. Help us? How? Ngozi swallowed and continued. I want to offer myself as your surrogate. I'm willing to carry your child. The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Gloria's eyes widened, her lips trembling as the words sank in. You would do that for us? She said, as tears pooled in her eyes. Ngozi nodded. Yes, madam. You have been good to me and my family, and I cannot bear to see you suffer like this anymore. I believe this is something I can do to help you find joy. Mr. Mba leaned forward, his expression guarded. Ngozi, do you understand what you are offering? This is not a small thing. Pregnancy is tedious, it's risky, and it will change your life for months. Why would you do this for us? Ngozi met his gaze firmly. Sir, I know the risks. I've prayed about this. I believe this is what God wants me to do. I've carried 4 children already, and I have my husband's blessings. You are not strangers to me, and I trust that you will care for this child when the time comes. Gloria, overcome with emotion, let out a sob and rushed to Ngozi, taking her hands. Ngozi, I don't even know what to say. Do you know how long I've prayed for this miracle? And here you are, offering it to me. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Madam, don't thank me. Thank God. He is the one who makes all things possible. Mr. Mba, though reserved, nodded slowly. If you're unsure about this, Ngozi, then I will not stand in the way. You're not a stranger. You've been part of this family for years. If you are willing to help us, then I'm willing to try. Gloria looked at her husband, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and relief. Ndu, do you mean it? You will agree to this? He gave her a small, reassuring smile. Yes, Gloria, if this is our chance, then we must take it. Ngozi offers may be the only answer to our prayers. For Gloria, the overwhelming relief and gratitude she felt were unlike anything she had expected in years. After nearly 2 decades of longing, she finally felt as though she was standing on the edge of a miracle. The weeks following, the legal paper was drawn up and signed, ensuring everyone understood their roles and responsibilities. Ngozi and Ekene were promised a monetary settlement of 10 million naira. 5 million to be paid upfront, a sum that felt like a lifeline to their struggling family. Additionally, the Mbas arranged for the Udos to move into the servants' quarters in the compound so that Ngozi's pregnancy could be closely monitored. When the embryo transfer was declared successful, the joy in the Mba household was palpable. One morning, the doctor called Gloria with the news they had been longing to hear. Congratulations, Mrs. Mba, the doctor said over the phone, her voice warm. The embryo's transfer was successful. Ngozi is pregnant. Gloria froze, her breath catching in her throat. She's pregnant? She whispered. Yes, it's still early, but everything looks promising. We'll monitor her closely to ensure a healthy pregnancy. Tears cascaded down her face as she hung up the phone. She turned to Ndu, who was sipping his tea in the dining room. Ndu, she cried. Ngozi is pregnant. It worked. Ndu set his cup down carefully, his usually stoic face breaking into a rare smile. He stood and embraced his wife. It's finally happening, Gloria. God has answered our prayers. That evening, the Mbas gathered the Udo family to celebrate. Ngozi and Ekene sat humbly at the dining table with their children, who were wide-eyed at the opulence of the Mba residence. A sumptuous meal had been prepared, and for once, there was no barrier between employer and employee. They were simply two families united by the miracle they had been blessed to share. The Mbas were scheduled for an ultrasound scan at 20 weeks. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as the doctor guided the probe across Ngozi's belly. Gloria held Ngozi's hand tightly, her face lit with a mixture of nerves and excitement. Ndu sat stiffly in the corner, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the screen as the grainy image of the baby appeared. The doctor's brows furrowed slightly as she adjusted the machine. Her hesitation was not lost to anyone. Is everything all right? Gloria asked anxiously. The doctor hesitated, then smiled and said, I'll explain in a few minutes. When she was thoroughly done, she put down the probe, cleaned Ngozi's belly with a paper towel, and helped her to sit up. Then she cleared her throat and said, There's something I need to explain. The fetus appears to have spinal bifida, a condition where the spine and spinal cord don't form properly. It's a lifelong condition that may require surgeries and ongoing care. The room fell into a stunned silence. Gloria's grip on Ngozi's hand slackened, and Ndu shot out of his chair, his face contorted with disbelief. What are you saying? Ndu demanded, his voice rising. After all we've been through, you're telling me the child is defective? Ndu! Gloria gasped, horrified by his words. I mean it, Gloria. How can this be happening? This isn't what we prayed for. Ngozi, who had been silent, placed a hand protectively over her belly. Sir, this child is still a gift from God, she said. Every child is a blessing, no matter the challenges. Blessing? Ndu spat, his face darkening. This is a curse. I won't accept it. I won't raise a child like this. Tears welled up in Gloria's eyes as she turned to her husband. Ndu, please, don't say such things. This is still our child, our miracle. We can get through this together. But Ndu shook his head vehemently. No, I didn't sign up for this. This was supposed to be the answer to our prayers, not another burden. Ngozi's heart ached as she listened. She had carried this child with love and faith, enduring the discomforts of pregnancy and the sacrifices required to give them back their long-awaited joy. To hear the child dismissed so cruelly was a crushing blow. Gloria looked at the doctor and said, Isn't there something that can be done to correct this? We can perform surgeries to manage it as best as we can, but he may need lifelong care to manage the complications. What complications, doctor? Asked Gloria. The doctor looked at her with pity, then said, He will most likely suffer limb paralysis. Mrs. Mba clutched her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Mr. Mba's face darkened, his hands clenched into fists. This cannot be happening. After everything we've endured, this is our reward? In the following weeks, the Mba's attitude towards Ngozi shifted dramatically. Ndu grew cold and distant, barely acknowledging her presence. He began to avoid discussions about the pregnancy altogether, leaving Gloria to navigate the emotional turmoil alone. Ngozi sat with her husband Ekene in their small quarters. She broke down in tears and said, "Ekene, I don't understand. We've done everything they asked. We've prayed, we've hoped, and yet, now they see this child as a curse. What did we do wrong?" Ekene wrapped his arms around her, his voice steady. "You didn't do nothing wrong, Ngozi. You've done more than most would. If they can't see the value of this child, that's on them, not us. We'll wait for their final decision. If they don't want the baby anymore, then they'll have to take you back to the hospital and have it removed." "What?" Ngozi echoed in disbelief. "Take it out, as in abortion? Kill the baby? I can't believe you would agree to such a thing, Ekene. What would you have me do? Answer me, woman. Are you going to take responsibility for the child? That will be an extra mouth to feed, not to mention he will need special care and devices. How are we supposed to handle that financially when we are already struggling with 4 able-bodied children?" Ngozi said nothing. She just sat there, held her tummy and cried. Ndu called Ngozi and Ekene and said, "I do not want this pregnancy anymore. My first son will not be a cripple. I already called the hospital and we have an appointment for tomorrow." Gloria, overhearing the exchange, burst into tears. "Ndu, how can you be so cruel? We waited years for this child. We can't turn our backs now. Please, consider this." "Woman, my decision is final," Ndu yelled. Ngozi looked up at Mr. Mba and said, "Sir, that is killing. You will be killing an innocent baby, and I will not submit my body for such an atrocious act. No matter what you may think, God does not make mistakes, even if we don't understand his plan." "Fine," Mr. Mba yelled. "If you want to keep carrying this pregnancy, that's your decision," he said curtly. "But I won't be responsible for it. You're on your own." Then he stormed off. Ekene stood there, quiet as a mouse, but from his countenance, you could tell he was very angry. Turning to his wife, he said, "I will not be responsible for this child either. I can't afford to feed another mouth, let alone one that carries extra baggage." From that moment, the bond between the two families fractured. Ngozi felt isolated, but she clung to her faith, praying and hoping that God would touch their hearts. She continued to carry the child with love, determined to see the pregnancy through, even as the Mba's rejection cast a shadow over her sacrifice. Ngozi's decision to see the pregnancy through against her husband's wish put a strain on their marriage. 2 weeks after Mr. Mba announced his wish to terminate the pregnancy, Ngozi and her husband woke up one morning to discover a note which had been tucked under their footmat. "Ekene, come and see this," she called, her voice trembling. "What is it now, Ngozi?" he asked. Ngozi handed him the note silently, her hands shaking. He unfolded it, his eyes narrowing as he read. "We cannot handle this burden. He is your responsibility now. The house has been sold. The buyer will be contacting you soon." Ekene read it twice, his face twisting with fury and disbelief. "What kind of wickedness is this?" he exploded, crumbling the note in his fist. "They sold the house? They left us nothing. Nothing. Ekene, what do we do now? We have nowhere to go, and I'm carrying their child. How can they abandon us like this?" Ekene turned to her, his voice harsh. "I told you, Ngozi. I warned you that this surrogacy would bring nothing but trouble. But you wouldn't listen. Now look where it's gotten us. Homeless, broke, and saddled with a child that isn't even ours. Ngozi recoiled as if she had been struck. Ekene, how can you say such a thing? This child is innocent. Don't you see that God gave us this child for a reason? What reason? Because of your stubbornness, we've lost 5 million naira they owed us. I put the rest of the money into that business Kelechi told me about. And now, that's gone too. We have nothing, Ngozi. Nothing. Ngozi's heart sank. What do you mean the money is gone? Ekene avoided her gaze. The business failed. Kelechi said it was a sure thing, but it collapsed within a week. I was trying to secure our future, but now, he trailed off, his shoulders slumping. Ngozi stared at him, her shock giving way to her devastation. That money was supposed to take care of us and this baby, Ekene. How could you? Don't lecture me, Ngozi, he snapped, his frustration boiling over. You're the one who brought us into this mess by agreeing to carry their child. I was against it from the start, but you didn't listen to me. Now we're suffering for your decisions. This child is a blessing, Ekene. It's not their fault. And it's not mine. I did this out of love and faith, not greed. Over the next few days, the strain between them deepened. Ekene withdrew, spending long hours away from the compound, while Ngozi tried to find solace in her prayer and the support of her children. She tried to find another job as a housekeeper, but no one would hire a heavily pregnant woman. The new owner of the house came to see the occupants. He gave them 1 week to vacate the house. The situation put an even bigger strain on their marriage. Frustrated, not knowing where to go with his family, Ekene stormed out of the house and never came back. Ngozi had searched every possible place, but there had been no sign of him. The knock on the door came just as Ngozi was feeding her youngest child, Amarachi. With shaky hands, she rose and opened the door to find 2 police officers standing there, their faces sullen. Madam Ngozi Udo, one of them asked. Yes, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, may we come in? There's something we need to tell you. Her heart plummeted as she stepped aside to let them enter. Her children, sensing the tension, huddled quietly in the corner of the room. The officer cleared his throat. Madam, we regret to inform you that your husband, Mr. Ekene Udo, was involved in a hit-and-run accident 3 days ago. He died at the scene. Ngozi froze. Her knees buckled as she collapsed onto the nearby chair. Ekene can't be gone. He can't leave us like this. The days that followed were a blur of grief and confusion. Ngozi was not only mourning her husband, but also grappling with the terrifying reality of her situation. She was heavily pregnant, homeless, and now the sole provider for her 4 children. As she sat on the edge of her bed one evening, clutching her Bible, she wept. God, why? Why have you allowed this to happen? Have I not been faithful? Have I not trusted you with everything? How much more can I bear? Wiping her tears, she resolved to stay strong for her children and the unborn baby. She sold the refrigerator, television, gas cooker, and other properties in the 7th quarters where they were staying, and took the proceeds and moved down to the village with her kids. Before Ngozi left the city of Umuahia, she visited the hospital and told the doctor everything that happened. I am deeply sorry for everything you've been through. Losing your husband and being abandoned by the Mbaz is more than anyone should bear. The doctor paused, choosing her words carefully. But I have to ask, why didn't you agree to the termination when Mr. Mbaz suggested it? Given everything that's happened, it might have spared you and your family some of this pain. Ngozi straightened, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Doctor, I won't lie. When Mr. Mbaz said those words, it felt like a knife through my heart. I was angry. I was confused, and yes, I was scared for the baby and me. What if I had died in the process? This child is not a mistake, no matter what they think. The doctor frowned slightly, but Ngozi, the child's condition will make life even harder for you. Raising a baby with spina bifida requires resources, time, and constant care. Without the birth support, how will you manage? Ngozi looked down at her hands. Doctor, I don't know how I will manage. I don't have all the answers. But what I know is this: God doesn't make mistakes. This baby has a purpose, just like every other child. Who am I to decide whether he deserves to live or not? The doctor nodded slowly, humbled by her conviction. Well, she said, if you're determined to see this through, then you're going to need support, especially once the baby is born. There are organizations that assist families with special needs children. It's not much, but it's a start. Ngozi's face lit up with gratitude. Thank you so much, doctor. That means more to me than you know. I just want to give this child a chance, no matter how difficult it is. You're a remarkable woman, Ngozi. I wish more people had your faith and courage. Whatever happens, don't hesitate to reach out. You're not alone. Ekene was buried and Ngozi moved on with her children. She moved back to her father's house. Mazi Udensi, a kind-hearted man, welcomed her and her children with open arms. With the proceeds from the sale of the properties from the Mba servant quarters, Ngozi started a small but bustling provision shop in the village, where she sold everyday essentials. When it was time for the baby to be born, she returned to the city, taking her eldest daughter Chisom with her for support. The doctor, who had been a pillar of strength, introduced her to an organization dedicated to helping children with spina bifida and hydrocephalus. The group provided counseling, financial aid, and medical resources to families in need. The birth of the baby was a delicate process, but Ngozi was surrounded by compassionate doctors and nurses who assured both mother and baby were safe. When she held her son for the first time, she cried, "Welcome to the world, Chukwebuka." She whispered, the name meaning God is great. You are a miracle, my son. Baby Ebuka, as they fondly called him, underwent multiple surgeries in his early weeks of life to address the complications of his condition. It was a challenging time, but Ngozi stayed by his side, praying fervently and finding solace in his innocent smiles. Chisom helped care for him, learning to assist with his needs as they navigated this new chapter. Despite his challenges, Ebuka was a happy-spirited child who brought light and laughter to the family. His siblings adored him, and he quickly became the center of their lives. "Look at him, Mama," Chisom would often say, watching her brother giggle as she played with him. "He's so full of joy. It's like he doesn't even know he's different." Ngozi would smile, her heart swelling with gratitude. "That's because he's a gift, Chisom. God gave him to us to remind us that joy can be found even in the hardest of times." As baby Ebuka grew, the organization provided him with a wheelchair, which allowed him to explore his surroundings. Years passed and life had transformed for Ngozi and her family. The once overwhelming challenges that had threatened to break them had instead become the foundation for their resilience and success. Ngozi's small provision shop had grown into a thriving mini-mart, a hub of activity in the village. Her tireless work and shrewd business sense had ensured that her children could pursue their dreams. Chisom, her eldest daughter, stood proudly at the forefront of these achievements, having completed her National Youth Service Corps. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Chisom shared the exciting news. "Mama," she began, "my visa has been approved and I've received full funding for my PhD program. I'll be leaving for Canada in 2 months." Ngozi's eyes brimmed with tears, a mixture of joy and bittersweet emotion. Chisom, my child, she said, taking her daughter's hands in hers. You have made me so proud. Your father would have been so proud of you too. You've worked so hard and now the world is opening up to you. Chisom hugged her mother tightly. Mama, everything I am today is because of you. You taught us how to work hard, how to pray, and how to never give up. I'm taking your lessons with me, and I'll make you even prouder. Ebuka, now a vibrant young boy in his early teens, was still the heart of the family. He no longer used the wheelchair. His condition had improved, and he now moved around with the aid of his braces. At 14, he was in his last class of secondary school, getting ready to write his certificate examinations. One sunny afternoon, as Ngozi sat in her shop arranging goods, a black car rolled up in front of her shop. The sound of its tires crunching over the gravel drew the attention of curious onlookers. From it stepped a man and woman who were barely recognizable, Mr. and Mrs. Mba. The years had aged them significantly. Their clothes, though clean, lacked the elegance they had once been known for, and their faces bore the unmistakable lines of hardship and regret. The Mbas found their way to Ngozi's shop, their steps hesitant as they approached. Ngozi, now a confident and respected businesswoman, looked up from her work. Mr. and Mrs. Mba, she said cautiously, standing straight. What brings you here after all these years? Mrs. Mba stepped forward, her eyes welling with tears. Ngozi, please, hear us out. We've come to ask for your forgiveness. Ngozi folded her arms across her chest, her expression unreadable. Forgiveness? After what you did to me? You abandoned us without a word, left us with nothing, and now you expect forgiveness? Why are you really here? Mr. Mba cleared his throat. Ngozi, we know we were wrong. We let fear and pride cloud our judgment. We've lived with the regret every single day. And now, we've come to take our son. Your son? The child you called a burden and abandoned before he was born? That boy is my son, legally and in every way that matters. Mrs. Mba began to sob openly. Ngozi, please. We were foolish, but we're not the same people we were back then. We've lost everything, our wealth, our status, and we never had another child. Chukwuebuka is all we have left. Please, let us at least see him. Ngozi's voice was firm and her anger barely contained. You didn't lose Ebuka, you gave him up. You left him and me to face the consequences of your cowardice. I carried that boy, gave birth to him, and raised him. He is my son, not yours. Mr. Mba straightened, his tone turning desperate. Ngozi, we didn't know what we were doing. We were scared. You knew exactly what you were doing, Ngozi interrupted sharply. And because of your actions, I lost my husband. The law recognizes me as his legal parent. I went through the courts years ago to adopt him. I have every right to keep him safe from people who abandon him without a second thought. He is all we have, Ngozi. Please, just let us see him. Just to tell him we are sorry. Ngozi shook her head, her voice breaking. I don't want you anywhere near my son. Please, leave. Later that evening, Ngozi sat with her children to share what had happened. Ebuka listened intently. Mama, Ebuka said, you've always taught us to forgive. I don't know these people, and I don't know if I want to. But if they are truly sorry, maybe letting them apologize is the right thing to do. Ngozi's eyes filled with tears as she held his hand. Ebuka, you're so much stronger than I was at your age. If you're willing to hear them out, then I won't stop you. but I'll be by your side no matter what. The next day, Ngozi arranged for the Mbas to meet Ebuka under her watchful eye. As the boy approached, Mrs. Mba covered her mouth, her tears flowing freely now. "Ebuka," she whispered, "look at you." Her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. We're so sorry. We were wrong to abandon you. We don't deserve your forgiveness, but we've come to ask for it anyway." Ebuka studied them quietly, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm. "I don't know you, but I know what Mama told me, and I know that she never gave up on me, even when you did. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be here. I forgive you." Mrs. Mba nodded, tears running down her face. "Thank you, son. That's more than we deserve." Ngozi, standing protectively by her son, spoke firmly. "Ebuka is my child, and his future is with me and his sisters. You will not disrupt our lives, but if he chooses to speak with you again, that will be his decision." As the Mbas left the village, humbled and broken, Ngozi felt a sense of closure. She had done what was right for her son and herself. Ebuka, her miracle child, was thriving, and no one, not even those who had abandoned him, could take that away. Who is he that says a thing and it comes to pass when the Lord God commanded it not? What lessons did you learn from this story? What would you have done if you were in Ngozi's shoes? Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I do hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you took away from the story in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. And compliments of the season.